In today's story, we'll unravel an incredible tale of fate, kindness, and unexpected alliances. It all starts with a simple act of compassion, a single alien saving a human child. Little did she know that one gesture would spark a chain of events that would change the fate of a planet forever. A single life saved led to humanity returning the favor in ways that would surprise even the most skeptical among us. Welcome to Galactic Conundrums, the place where the mysteries of the universe come alive. Have you ever wondered what lies beyond our world? What if extraterrestrial life is closer than we think? Or what if there are things in the cosmos we can't even begin to understand? This is the channel that explores those questions and more, diving deep into the strange, the unexplained, and the downright mysterious. But that's just the beginning. Stay tuned for the shocking twists and fascinating revelations that follow. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with our latest adventures. And leave a comment below. What do you think is out there, waiting to be discovered? Now, let's dive into the mystery of the day. The twin moons of Xalora hung in the sky, casting soft, silvery light over the sprawling garden. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, the ground rich and fertile, vibrating with life. Xalora, a member of the Xalorian species, walked barefoot through the garden, her feet brushing against the cool grass. The plants around her were more than mere foliage. They were alive, a part of her symbiotic connection with nature, keeping the world around her in perfect harmony. The sound of distant bird calls echoed through the trees, a melody that resonated deep within her. She stood still for a moment, closing her eyes to breathe in the air. It was fresh, pure, untouched by the outside world. For a brief second, Xalora felt as though she could remain here forever, in this serene corner of Xalora, where time seemed to slow, where peace was an unspoken rule. Xalora, my home. A world where life is balanced, people, nature, and all living things moving in sync. A place where time flows like the gentle rivers, slow and steady. But, sometimes, peace is a fleeting thing. And no one is ever truly ready when it slips through your fingers. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered. A dark shadow swept across the sky. The stars above were swallowed whole by a thick cloud of blackness. The wind picked up, rushing through the trees with an eerie hum, as if warning of an approaching storm. Xalora's eyes snapped open, her senses tingling. She felt a chill run through her, despite the warmth of the evening air. A low, mechanical hum echoed across the sky, growing louder by the second. Something was wrong. Something unnatural. Looking up, Xalora saw the massive, alien ships slicing through the sky, their sharp, sleek forms cutting through the clouds like knives. The ships gleamed with cold, metallic precision, their surfaces reflecting the faint light of the moons as they descended toward her world. They moved with terrifying speed, their engines roaring like distant thunder. The ground beneath her feet trembled as if the very earth was recoiling from the side above. Birds scattered into the sky, and the animals in the woods fell eerily silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I could feel it, the shift in the air. The world had shifted. It wasn't just the ships or the darkness creeping in, it was something deeper. Something far worse was coming, and there was no escaping it. The peaceful world of Xalora, once untouched and serene, was no longer safe. The silence that followed the ship's arrival was deafening, like the calm before a violent storm. And Xalora knew, with every fiber of her being, that this was only the beginning. The sky, once tranquil and filled with the soft glow of the twin moons, now churned with a foreboding darkness. Without warning, the air around Terra began to vibrate, the pressure in the atmosphere shifting as something unnatural approached. A low rumble echoed from above, the sound distant at first, but growing louder, resonating deep in her chest. Tara's heart raced, a cold sweat forming on the back of her neck as she instinctively looked up. The first massive ship broke through the clouds, its form sharp and angular, gleaming ominously in the fading light. A second followed, then a third, each one larger than the last, blocking out the stars and casting a shadow over the land below. These ships weren't just ordinary visitors, they were colossal, their engines humming like a beast ready to strike. The ground trembled beneath Tara's feet, a deep, vibrating thrum that seemed to come from the very core of the planet. The ships descended with a force that shattered the peace of Xalora. The trees bent violently, their branches snapping under the pressure of the air displaced by the descending ships. A deafening roar filled the air as the ship's thrusters ignited, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The very ground beneath Terra shook violently, as though the planet itself was protesting the invasion. Birds scattered from the trees, their panicked cries a stark contrast to the normally serene world they had inhabited. The first impact was like thunder, the sound so deep it seemed to echo through Tara's bones. It felt as if the entire planet had been struck by an invisible hand. A great plume of dust and debris erupted from the point of impact, rising into the air in a cloud of darkness that blocked out what little light remained. At that moment, Tara's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a landing, it was an invasion, a violent act of force. These ships were not here to trade or to visit. They were here to conquer. Emergency. All citizens of Xalora, proceed to shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Tara's breath hitched in her throat as the words from the intercom pierced through her panic. The warning was clear, but the urgency in the voice, crackling with static, sent a chill down her spine. The world she knew was being torn apart in an instant. Her mind raced. She needed to act. This was no ordinary attack, no mere drill. The air itself felt thick with danger, and she could sense it in her bones. This was the beginning of something far worse than anything she had ever experienced. Tara stumbled backward, her eyes still fixed on the descending ships, her legs moving on their own as she turned and ran. The ground seemed to shift beneath her, the earth trembling with every step she took. Her body moved faster than her mind could process each step, fueled by pure instinct as she raced toward the safety of her home. The sounds of destruction were growing louder now. The ground shook beneath her as another ship landed with a thunderous crash. The distant rumble of the engines vibrated in her chest, rattling the very air around her. Her heart was racing, but it wasn't just fear, it was something deeper. Something primal that told her this was only the beginning. As Tara ran, she glanced over her shoulder one last time. The sky above was dark, nearly black with the presence of these invaders. The peaceful world of Xalora was no more, replaced by the horrifying sound of warships descending from the heavens, bringing with them a promise of destruction. Her thoughts raced. Was this really happening? Were these invaders the ones her people had been warned about? She didn't know. All she knew was that she had to reach safety, before it was too late. Inside her modest home, the walls made from living wood hummed softly as Tara hurried to activate the emergency communication terminal. The screen flickered to life, casting a faint greenish glow across the room. The air was thick with tension, and the usual calm of her surroundings now felt oppressive. Tara's eyes darted to the door, half expecting an explosion to rip through the walls at any moment. But this message was far more dangerous than any physical threat. The image of the council leader materialized on the screen. His face was drawn tight with stress, his normally composed demeanor cracked under the weight of the news he was about to deliver. The room felt colder, as though the warmth of Xalora itself had been drained by the gravity of the situation. Council leader, voice wavering slightly. We've contacted the Galactic Union. We've begged for assistance. But they have refused. His words echoed through the room like a death knell, each syllable weighed down by a heavy finality. Tara's breath caught in her throat. Her stomach twisted with a rising sense of dread. She could see the leader's hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the settings on his terminal, his eyes not meeting the camera for a moment, perhaps a sign of his own disbelief. Council leader. They claim that our position in the galaxy is too remote, that we're too insignificant for them to divert their resources. The Union has abandoned us, Tara. We are alone. The words hung in the air like poison, spreading a cold that reached deep into Tara's chest. Her body felt frozen, her thoughts clouded with a fury that burned so hot it threatened to consume her. The peaceful world of Xalora, her home, had been under attack for what felt like an eternity, and yet, the one entity that promised safety, the Galactic Union, had turned its back on them in their time of need. Tara's fists clenched, her nails digging into the palms of her hands as she struggled to contain the rage building inside her. Her vision blurred for a moment, the sharp edges of the room softening as her anger bubbled up uncontrollably. Tara, thinking, voice tinged with disbelief. The Union, they've abandoned us. After all we've given them, after all we've done. We are nothing to them. Just another distant world that can burn in the darkness. But I won't stand by and watch it happen. Her breathing quickened, a sense of betrayal so intense that it was almost unbearable. She knew the Union's political games, their manipulation of power, but this was a level of cruelty she couldn't comprehend. She had always believed that, no matter how isolated Xalora was, the Union would act when needed. But now, standing on the brink of destruction, she was left with nothing but empty promises. Tara's hand hovered over the terminal, her fingers brushing against the cool surface as she prepared to disconnect the call. But she couldn't. Not yet. The anger, the betrayal, she needed to hear more, to understand how deep this wound really went. Council leader, closing his eyes, voice breaking. I know you're all waiting for the help we were promised. I can only apologize. But there is nothing more we can do. We are on our own. The image flickered and disappeared, leaving the room in eerie silence. The soft hum of the living wood seemed louder now, the quiet after the storm of emotions that had just crashed through her. Tara stood motionless for a long moment, her heart heavy with the weight of the words that had just been spoken. Outside, the sounds of the invasion still echoed, distant yet relentless. But inside her mind, the quiet was deafening. Tara knew, in that instant, that she could not rely on the Union anymore. They had abandoned her people. And now, it was up to her, to the people of Xalora, to survive, alone. Her mind flashed to the ruins of the cities she had seen earlier, the burning sky, the crumbling buildings, the desperate cries of the people. How could the Union have allowed this? How could they let it happen? But in the pit of her stomach, a new sense of resolve began to form. Xalora might have been abandoned by the Galactic Union, but it was not abandoned by Tara. And as long as she breathed, she would fight to the end. Do you enjoy this story? Do you think their journey has only just begun, or is there so much more waiting for them out there? Leave your comment below. Galactic Conundrums always wants to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the story going. The room around Tara seemed to fade as her mind drifted back to that day, far from the chaos, far from the threat that now encircled her world. It was as if the present dissolved, leaving only the shadows of the past, flickering faintly in the corners of her mind. She stood in the vast, empty corridors of Trading Outpost 7, a bustling station in the Outer Rim, filled with exotic goods and travelers from all corners of the galaxy. But on that day, the usual hum of activity was replaced by a sickening stillness. The only sounds that reached her were the distant echoes of the metal walls groaning under the weight of something far darker. Tara remembered the moment vividly, how the air had been charged with an unspoken tension, thick with the scent of ozone and burning machinery. She had been investigating an unusual chemical reaction from a batch of rare plants when the sound of frantic footsteps reached her ears. Turning sharply, Tara had spotted a young human child, no older than 7 or 8, sprinting down the hall. His eyes were wide with terror, and his clothes were stained with dirt and blood. He was running from something that chased him relentlessly, its low growls vibrating through the walls. A pair of glowing eyes flickered in the shadows, the predatory hunger evident in the way they followed the child's every step. Tara's instincts took over. She felt a pulse of energy surge through her, the same energy that had always been with her in times of danger. Without thinking, she moved swiftly, her limbs powered by a connection to the world around her. The Grox predator, a deadly alien creature with long, jagged claws and a body like a twisted blend of insect and reptile, stalked behind the child, its mandibles snapping in anticipation. Tara's heart pounded as she stepped in front of the child, her body a barrier between him and the nightmare that pursued him. She could see the Grox inching closer, its twisted exoskeleton shimmering under the harsh lights of the outpost, its multifaceted eyes gleaming with cold, animalistic intelligence. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. Tara, with her knowledge of chemistry and natural remedies, acted without hesitation. From a pouch at her side, she pulled out a vial of acidic compound she had synthesized, a fluid that could burn through almost anything. With a quick flick of her wrist, she tossed the vial at the Grox predator. The vial exploded on impact, releasing a bright, glowing mist. The predator shrieked, its hide sizzling and smoking as the compound ate away at it. The Grox staggered back, screeching in pain as it thrashed about, before retreating into the shadows, its pursuit abandoned. Tara stood motionless, her breath coming in quick gasps, as she turned to face the child. He was trembling, his white eyes locked onto hers as though he couldn't believe his salvation. His voice cracked as he spoke, his words slow but filled with a desperate gratitude. "Aiden," voice shaking. "You saved me. I don't know how to thank you." Tara looked down at him, the weight of the moment sinking in. Her heart softened as she placed a hand gently on his shoulder, guiding him toward the relative safety of a nearby room. His small body was trembling, but there was a glimmer of awe in his eyes. Tara, thinking. Aiden. I didn't know it then, but this small act of kindness would bind us forever. A fleeting moment of mercy, yet it planted a seed that would grow into something far greater than I could have ever imagined. The child, now safe, smiled up at her, a small, hopeful gesture in the face of the terror he had just experienced. As she helped him to safety, she thought back to the countless times her people had helped others, never expecting anything in return. But this time, something was different. A connection had been forged, one that she couldn't yet understand. The memory of that day now haunted her thoughts. A simple act of saving a child had somehow turned into a debt, a bond that had stretched across galaxies and time. She hadn't known it at the time, but the consequences of her actions that day would come back to her in ways she could never have predicted. Tara felt a pang of regret and frustration. She had saved him, but in doing so, she had unknowingly tied herself to a future she could not yet see, a future that would demand a price she hadn't agreed to pay. Tara's eyes closed briefly as the memory faded back into the recesses of her mind. But it lingered there, waiting. And now, with her world on the brink of destruction, that debt, that bond, had come calling. She couldn't escape it. The sky above was a battlefield, streaked with a glow of distant explosions as the invaders pressed closer to Xalora's surface. Tara stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes scanning the horizon, her heart pounding in her chest. The air around her was thick with tension, every breath felt heavy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The ground trembled faintly underfoot as more ships rumbled in the distance, their engines growling like beasts. Tara's fingers tightened around the hilt of the weapon at her side, a mixture of desperation and determination in her eyes. She knew the time for escape had passed. There would be no help from the Galactic Union. There was no hope of reinforcements, only the harsh reality that Xalora's fate now rested in her hands and the hands of the people she could rely on. She didn't know if they would be enough. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Her head snapped toward the source. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage, or perhaps a shadow cast by one of the descending ships. But then, as if defying the very laws of nature, a sleek, angular shuttle sliced through the clouded sky, its engines cutting the air with a sharp, piercing hum. The shuttle descended, its thrusters kicking up a cloud of dust and debris as it landed with controlled precision in the clearing ahead. The ground vibrated with the force of the landing, but Tara's focus was entirely on the craft. Her breath caught in her throat. The door of the shuttle slowly creaked open, revealing a silhouette emerging from within. As the figure stepped into the light, Tara's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened in disbelief as a familiar face came into view, one she had thought lost to time, a face she never thought she would see again. Aiden, smiling with quiet confidence. "Tara, don't you recognize me?" The voice was unmistakable. It was Aiden, the very child she had saved so many years ago. But now, he was no longer the frightened boy she had once shielded from the dangers of the galaxy. No, he was grown now, his once wide, innocent eyes now sharp and filled with purpose. The same fire that had flickered in his eyes all those years ago had grown into a steady, unwavering flame. He moved with the grace and certainty of someone who had seen battles, who had known both fear and triumph. Tara blinked, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Was this truly him? The child, now a man who had once stood before her with awe in his eyes, now stood with the same gaze, but this time it was filled with an unspoken understanding of the struggle that lay ahead. Her legs wavered slightly beneath her as a wave of recognition hit her, mingled with a rush of memories she had buried. Aiden, the child she had saved, the one she had returned to his people without ever expecting to see again. And now, here he was, standing before her, with a team of human rescuers by his side, ready to fight for her world. Tara's voice cracked slightly as she spoke, disbelief still laced in her words. "Tara," whispering, almost breathless. "Aiden, but how? Why are you here?" Aiden stepped forward, his movements calm, deliberate, each step sure and steady as he crossed the threshold of the shuttle's door. His companions, a small, but diverse group, followed behind him, their faces hard with resolve. Their uniforms were worn, their eyes weary, but there was no mistaking their purpose. They had come to fight. They had come to protect. Aiden, with a knowing smile. "I told you once that I would never forget what you did for me. And I meant it. We came because you saved me, now it's our turn to return the favor." Tara's heart swelled with emotion, the weight of everything that had led up to this moment crashing down on her. She had never expected anything in return for saving Aiden, not then, and certainly not now. But here he was, a living embodiment of the debt that had unknowingly been paid in full. The rest of Aiden's team, all seasoned, battle-hardened individuals, began setting up camp with quick efficiency. They moved with purpose, their every action a reminder that this was not the first time they had faced overwhelming odds. Tara could see it in the way they worked, how they communicated without speaking, how they scanned the area with practiced eyes, how they seemed to already know the next steps to take. But it was Aiden who remained in front of her, his gaze locked with hers, a silent promise passing between them. Tara had saved him once. Now, he was here to save her and her world. Tara took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm, grounding herself in the reality of what was happening. Tara, with a quiet, trembling voice. I never thought I would see you again. Aiden, you've come back. But, why? Why risk everything for Xalora? Aiden's smile softened, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. He stood tall, his presence commanding but kind. Aiden, his voice firm, yet filled with warmth. You saved me when I had nothing, Tara. You gave me a second chance. It's time for me to return the favor. And besides, Xalora is worth saving. Your world is worth saving. Do you enjoy this story? Do you think their journey has only just begun, or is there so much more waiting for them out there? Leave your comment below. Galactic Conundrums always wants to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the story going. Scene 6. Humanity intervenes. The battle begins. The sky above Xalora had become a chaotic canvas, streaked with fire and smoke as the invasion continued. The Grok's fleet, with their towering ships and relentless assault, loomed menacingly, casting shadows over the land. Yet, among this chaos, a new presence had emerged, one that defied the overwhelming odds stacked against them. Tara stood in the midst of the battlefield, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She had expected destruction, devastation, nothing more. But what unfolded before her eyes was far from what she had imagined. Aiden and his small team of human rescuers had begun to fight back, and what they lacked in numbers, they made up for with something far more dangerous: creativity, resourcefulness, and a sheer will to survive. The first sign of humanity's intervention came in the form of small, sleek vessels, darting through the air like shadows. Unlike the massive Grok's ships, these were light, quick, almost ghostly in the way they maneuvered. They zipped in and out of the towering warships, striking at vulnerable points with precision, before disappearing back into the clouds of smoke and dust. The Grok's fleet, with all its overwhelming firepower, seemed caught off guard, unable to predict the unpredictable nature of their attackers. Tara could barely comprehend what she was witnessing. The human ships, small as they were, seemed to know exactly how to exploit the weaknesses in the enemy's formations. They would strike with such speed, such force, and then vanished before the Groks had time to retaliate. The Grok's warships, massive and imposing, began to falter, their movements growing more erratic as the humans hit them from all sides, cutting through their defenses. From the ground, Terra could see the Grok's vessels glowing with angry red pulses as they attempted to retaliate, their energy weapons lashing out in the direction of the human ships. But every time they shot, they missed. Every time they closed in, they were ambushed once more. The Grok's technology, though powerful, was built for brute force, not for the agility or the mind-bending tactics that the humans employed. It wasn't long before the Grok's ships began to retreat, their once imposing formation crumbling under the relentless onslaught of human ingenuity. They were faltering, unable to keep up with the hit-and-run tactics, unable to predict the next move of the humans. Tara's breath caught in her throat as she watched one of the enemy ships explode in a bright flash of light, its massive frame torn apart by a well-placed strike from a human vessel. Tara's gaze turned to Aiden, who was coordinating the battle from the comms system, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. She marveled at how he had transformed from the child she once saved into a confident leader, one who seemed to understand the rhythm of war, and whose resolve shone through in every command. Aiden, over comms, his voice unwavering. We may not have a large army, but we have something stronger, the will to fight, the ability to outsmart our enemies, and the belief that everything worth protecting is worth fighting for. Tara watched as Aiden's team, no more than a handful of soldiers, moved with precision through the chaos, striking key targets with their small, fast vessels. Their tactics weren't just about strength, they were about bending the very rules of warfare. It was as if they understood something that the Groks didn't, that victory wasn't always about overwhelming power. Sometimes, it was about understanding your enemy and using their own weaknesses against them. The humans fought not with sheer force, but with cunning. They utilized guerrilla tactics that had been perfected over centuries of human conflict. The Grok's fleet was strong, but their reliance on brute force made them predictable. And that predictability was what Aiden and his team exploited to their advantage. Tara's mind raced as she took in the battle around her. She had seen countless battles in her lifetime, but never had she seen such a display of ingenuity. Humans, with their seemingly limited resources, had turned the tide of this war with nothing more than determination and a fierce, unyielding desire to protect those they cared about. The sound of another Grok's ship exploding in the distance snapped Tara back to reality. The Groks, once so confident, were now retreating in disarray. Tara's heart pounded in her chest, but it wasn't from fear, it was from awe. Humanity had done the impossible. They had given her people a chance. In the distance, Aiden's voice crackled over the comms once more, filled with quiet pride and determination. Aiden, his voice calm, resolute. This isn't just a fight for us, Tara. This is a fight for everything we believe in. And as long as we stand, we will fight. The battlefield was eerily silent now, the air thick with the remnants of smoke and dust. The once vibrant fields of Xalora, now scorched and battered by the violence of war, still held traces of their former beauty. The sky above, once darkened by the shadows of the invading fleet, was now a canvas of deep blues and soft pinks as the sun began to set. The sun's fading light cast long, haunting shadows across the ground, painting the battlefield in shades of gold and ash. Tara stood at the edge of the war-torn landscape, her eyes scanning the horizon, taking in the devastation around her. She had fought alongside humans, witnessed the impossible, and seen her world nearly lost. Yet, now, Xalora stood victorious thanks to the unexpected intervention of a group of human warriors. The Grok's fleet had retreated, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a flicker of hope for the future. Tara's gaze shifted to Aiden, who stood a short distance away, his posture relaxed yet filled with the quiet strength of a leader. He was speaking with his team, coordinating the next steps, but his eyes kept drifting back to Tara, as though he, too, were absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Tara took a deep breath and walked toward him, each step measured, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth, as if nature itself were beginning to heal. The plants around her, scorched by the fire of war, had already begun to slowly curl back toward the sky, as though they, too, were pushing for a new beginning. Tara reached for the small bundle wrapped carefully in her hands, the flower inside trembling slightly from the air's touch. It was a Xalorian bloom, one of the rarest and most revered symbols of her culture, a gift that transcended words, a gesture of deep respect, and an offering of the heart. As she approached Aiden, the world around them seemed to fall away. The chaos of battle, the smoke, the fear, everything seemed to vanish in that moment. Tara extended her hand, offering him the delicate flower, its petals shimmering with a faint, otherworldly glow, a gift from her soul. Tara, her voice steady, yet laced with emotion. This is all I have to offer you, a gift from my heart, a symbol of gratitude for what you've done for my people. Aiden's eyes widened in surprise as he took the flower from her hand, his fingers brushing hers for a brief moment. The weight of her gesture, the deep meaning behind it, was not lost on him. His gaze softened, and he stood silently for a moment, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Aiden, his voice low and filled with emotion. You saved me once, Tara. Now, I've come back to save you, to save your world. No one forgets acts of true selflessness. He held the Xalorian bloom in his hands, staring at its glowing petals as though it held the very essence of Xalora within it. The flower pulsed gently in his grip, as if responding to the emotions flowing between them: gratitude, respect, and an unspoken bond forged in the fires of battle. Tara watched him closely, her heart heavy with a mix of awe and relief. She had never expected anything in return for what she had done. And yet, here he was standing before her, a man shaped by the very kindness she had shown him as a child, now returning that same kindness in the form of protection and courage. Tara, softly, almost as a whisper. You've done more than I could ever have imagined, Aiden. You've saved us all. Aiden's eyes met hers, the weight of their shared history reflected in the depths of his gaze. There was no need for more words between them. The bond they shared, forged through a single act of mercy, was stronger than any promises or declarations could convey. The Xalorian bloom glowed even brighter now, its light casting an ethereal radiance over them both. Terra knew that this moment, this exchange, would be remembered long after the scars of war had faded. It was a gift not just of flowers, but of life itself, of one soul offering another chance at survival and hope. Aiden, still holding the flower, nodded once, his expression a mix of gratitude and quiet pride. Aiden. It's not about being remembered, Terra. It's about what we do when it counts. You gave me a chance once, and I'll always carry that with me. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the battle behind them, and the possibility of a new beginning ahead. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, its fading light casting a final, gentle glow over the battlefield. Xalora, a world forever changed, but now filled with the promise of healing. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling across the battlefield like liquid gold, washing away the darkness that had clung to Xalora for so long. The sky, once a chaotic swirl of smoke and fire, was now clear and still, a soft pastel canvas of lavender and amber stretching from one end of the world to the other. The sun's rays bathed the land in a new, hopeful light, as if the very air itself had been reborn. Terra stood at the edge of the forest, her gaze fixed on the land that had once been scarred by the violent clash of war. The trees, though still bearing the marks of the invasion, were beginning to show signs of life once more. Small shoots of green pushed through the charred earth, and the flowers, though battered, began to bloom again. It was a slow, quiet rebirth, but it was happening. Xalora was healing. She inhaled deeply, the air now carrying a freshness that spoke of renewal. The scent of earth, fresh foliage, and the remnants of the storm that had raged now filled her senses, grounding her. There was no denying the devastation. Xalora had suffered greatly, but as the winds shifted, bringing with them the soft whisper of nature's return, Terra could feel the heart of her world beginning to beat once again. A few steps away, Aiden and his team worked with quiet determination, organizing the human volunteers who had come to aid in the planet's recovery. They moved with practiced precision, coordinating the rebuilding of structures, distributing supplies, and helping the injured. The humans, though strangers to this world, had become its most steadfast allies, their hands and hearts now intertwined with the fate of Xalora. Terra watched Aiden from a distance, his face focused but calm as he spoke with a member of his team. The once young boy she had saved now stood as a leader, not just of men, but of hope. And in that hope, Terra found herself clinging to a truth that she had long forgotten in the quiet, timeless existence of her people. Terra, thinking, voice almost a whisper. Our world has changed, yes, but so have we. Humanity has shown me something I thought we had lost long ago. A truth I had forgotten: the strength of the human spirit, the bonds that tie us together, and the unwavering courage to rise again, no matter how dark the night. She felt a presence beside her, and as she turned, Aiden was there, standing quietly, his gaze following hers to the horizon. The weight of the past few days had not yet left his features, but there was something softer in his eyes now, a quiet pride in what they had accomplished. Aiden, his voice calm, resolute. It's not just about saving a planet, Terra. It's about the people who rise when the world falls, the ones who stand together in the face of the impossible. It's about what we do when everything seems lost. Terra nodded, her gaze returning to the growing light in the sky. The world around her was not the same, and neither was she. There was a new strength in her bones, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. And yet, as she looked at Aiden, she realized that this was not just about survival. It was about connection, about the ties that bound not just Xalora and humanity, but all of life in the galaxy. In the distance, the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy of trees, casting long, soft shadows across the land. The shadows of the past were fading, but the lessons they had taught remained etched deeply in the earth and in the hearts of those who had fought to protect it. The world was healing, and so too were the people who had stood by each other through the storm. Terra and Aiden stood side by side, watching the dawn of a new day, their hearts and minds aligned in a quiet understanding that the fight was not over but it had changed. The world, once so fragile and isolated, had found a new strength, and humanity had reminded them of the power of standing together. And just like that, the world of Xalora stood on the brink of a new dawn, one forged by the bonds between two worlds, one born from a debt of kindness and courage. The tides of fate had turned, and what seemed like an impossible struggle had transformed into a remarkable story of resilience, unity, and hope. But as the dust settles, questions still linger in the air. What other cosmic debts remain to be paid? What mysteries does the universe still hide, waiting to be uncovered? And so, as humanity and the Xalorians rebuild and recover, we are left with one undeniable truth: sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can echo through the stars, changing the course of history. But what will happen next? Could there be even greater mysteries lurking in the darkness of space? What other beings are out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to make their move? We want to hear from you. What do you think is out there in the vastness of space? Could humanity's future be intertwined with otherworldly forces, or are we alone in the universe? Leave your thoughts, theories, and comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next cosmic mystery awaits. Until then, keep looking to the stars, and stay curious, my fellow explorers.